Good morning and welcome to the 2021 OnFarm Forum. My name is Bronwyn Wilton and I'm the Principal and Lead Consultant of Wilton Consulting Group. My team has been supporting the Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association on the important OnFarm project. And we're very pleased to be here today with a full morning of sessions and speakers. I would now like to introduce Angela Strathoff of the Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association and Andrew Jameson of the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture and Food and Rural Affairs to provide a brief overview of the OnFarm project. Angela, I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you, Bronwyn. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us to learn about the OnFarm program. We just finished the first full year of delivery of the program, so we're very excited to share with you the results of that. I'll start by describing an overview of the program and then turn it over to Andrew, who will address comments from OMAFRA. OnFarm Applied Research and Monitoring Program is a 4-year initiative developed by OMAFRA, delivered by the Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association with a focus on soil health and water quality. It is funded by the Canadian Agricultural Partnership, a 5-year federal, provincial, territorial initiative to strengthen the agriculture and agri-food sector across the country. OSCIA has partnered with 5 conservation authorities: Essex Region Conservation Authority, Lower Thames Valley, Upper Thames River, Asabo Bayfield, and Maitland Valley, as well as a soil resource group, who is a Guelph-based soil consultancy, to deliver the program. The program is advised by a technical working group, which is made up of scientific experts on water quality and soil health, as well as a stakeholder engagement working group, which is made up of stakeholders across Ontario's agricultural industry, including representation from industry, government, and academia. The program continues work that was established under the Great Lakes Agricultural Stewardship Initiative, or GLASI, and it researches priorities that were identified by Ontario's Soil Health and Conservation Strategy, a document released by the province in 2018. OnFarm has 3 essential pillars that we are prioritizing connectivity among: water quality, soil health, and engagement. Water quality continues monitoring and modeling of surface water and nutrient loading in priority subwatersheds in the Lake Huron and Lake Erie Basin. And soil health is being considered as a means to reducing nutrient loading and improving water quality in the regions as well. We're also establishing in-field paired trials that test best management practices and their effectiveness on changing indicators of soil health. These are tested on real farms across Ontario by farmer cooperators working with researchers, the CAs, and the Soil Resource Group. And finally, the program has a big emphasis on engagement. Based on what we know about the effectiveness of peer-to-peer learning among farmers, we are seeking enhanced opportunities to connect them with other farmers and stakeholders and people across Ontario agriculture to really share the results of the first 2 pillars, water quality and soil health, and learn from each other about how we can improve those areas on farm. Ultimately, the program wants to develop and foster a network of demonstration farms across the province where people can learn more about the findings of the program. You'll see here on the map that within the first year of the program, we did manage to successfully establish 25 soil health test sites that you'll hear more about this morning from Don King at the Soil Resource Group, as well as 8 sites that are managed by the conservation authorities in edge-of-field regions adjacent to surface water, where the water quality and quantity is being monitored using legacy infrastructure from the GLASI program. The establishments of these sites was by far the biggest accomplishment of year 1 of the program. Despite the challenges thrown at us by the pandemic, the cooperators that we are working with were fantastic, and all of the best management practices were able to be implemented in year 1. And with that, I will turn it over to Andrew Jameson from OMAFRA.
Thanks, Angie. So I'm here representing the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, and wanted to give a bit of context of why this is such an important initiative on behalf of the ministry. So next slide, Angie. So for us at the ministry and in myself within the environmental management branch, stewardship programming is one of our key deliverables as a branch, and using an adaptive management approach where we understand the science and information is going to evolve and want to base our policy and legislation and programs on well-sounded evidence that's grounded in science. This is where the initiative such as this is such a key initiative for us, because it provides a foundational set of parameters and knowledge that we can build upon, that we can help influence those future policy and legislation and programs in the future. It also acts as an ability to gain information on performance measures and improve performance measures that allows us as the ministry to be able to monitor and report progress on the sector's commitments towards a number of environmental initiatives that are ongoing, including the soil health strategy or the Canada-Ontario Lake Erie Action Plan. So this is why this is very, very key for us to get this foundational knowledge and continue it forward. Next slide, please. In addition, because it's such a critical piece for our programming, we have obviously recognized the importance of long-term monitoring. And Angie had mentioned at the beginning about the GLASSI initiative. So we're thankfully continuing a lot of the work that begun in that initiative through our water quality and nutrient loading piece or pillar that's in as part of this project. Looking at those same priority sub-watersheds that we're working on in GLASSI, we're continuing to work in those priority sub-watersheds, and the purpose of working in those is to continue to measure the impact of BMPs at reducing phosphorus loading, and all of this will help inform policy and programs at better targeting some of our BMPs to address the issues in the Lake Erie, as well as we're looking to do a better job at quantifying the economics impact of these BMPs, and that'll help spur on more KTT opportunities and really connecting with the growers. The other piece that we're excited about is the establishment of a lot of these soil health sites that'll be addressing a number of the actions in our Ontario soil health and conservation strategy. So the information from some of these sites are really going to help us develop some provincial indicators to measure soil health. They'll be seen as the baseline measurements for soil health across the province. And as you saw from the map, they're spread completely across the province. So this is not just a Lake Erie Basin initiative. This is a provincial-wide initiative. And again, it'll be able to be used as an enhancement and demonstration sites to hopefully encourage more adoption of soil health practices across the province. And as I mentioned, it's supporting some of the key initiatives that our branch is supporting, which is the Canada-Ontario Lake Erie Action Plan, our Ontario Soil Health and Conservation Story, and the overarching Made in Ontario Environment Plan. Next slide, please. So I wanted to take the opportunity to thank, on behalf of the ministry, a number of people. This was obviously a very challenging year, given the COVID situation. So I'm very happy, we're very happy about the progress that was made despite all those constraints that we faced. So on behalf of the ministry, I'd like to thank Angie and Andy and the team at OSCIA for all their effort for keeping this on track and on the rails. I'd like to thank Don King and the team at SRG for doing a great job of establishing those sites. That was a key deliverable that was due this year, and kudos to his team to being able to establish that. I'd like to thank all of our CA partners. So Katie Stamler and her team at the Essex Region Conservation Authority, Colin Little and his team at the Lower Thames Valley Conservation Authority, Craig Merkley and his team at the Upper Thames, Mary Veliz and her team at the Sauble Bayfield, Ben Van Dieden and his team at Maitland Valley. I'd also like to thank Brown Wilton and the Wilton Consulting Group for putting on this event in a virtual setting. I know we'd all prefer this to be in a person setting, but the fact that it's been done very well in a virtual setting, I'd like to thank them. And then I'd like to thank my team who's been involved in this. So I'd like to thank Anna Carolla, Nicole Rabe, Kevin McCaig, Sebastian Belliard, and Brian Dixon, who have all been helpful in participating in this and keeping me informed as to the progress of this project. Thanks, and back to you, Brian.
Wonderful. Thank you, Andrew and Angela. As part of the 2021 On-Farm Research Forum, we are very pleased to have Dr. Stefan Galens of the Practical Farmers of Iowa with us for this forum. Stefan is the organization's Research and Field Crops Director. He leads PFI's Cooperators program, which is their vehicle for conducting on-farm research on the issues and concerns deemed most important by their farming members. Stefan will discuss how farmer-led research fosters curiosity and continuous improvement. As you're watching this video, just please note that due to some technical challenges during the event, the recording of Stefan's talk begins partway into his presentation. We will begin showing his opening slides and then segue into his audio for the rest of the keynote. We apologize for this inconvenience, but we hope you will still find Stefan's presentation inspiring and insightful. And with that, we'll turn over to Stefan's presentation. Thank you.
High rate was the farmer's typical rate, what he or she was using at that time in that field or that farm. And the low rate was one of their choosing as well. How much to dial back was completely up to him or her, depending on their crop rotation, their farm, etc. Again, it was relatively easy for them to do. 6 reps, alternating, randomizing strips. The strips ran the length of the crop field. The width of the strip accommodated that farmer's equipment, the planter, the toolbar, the combine, whatever. It varied by farm, but the strips were uniform within farms. And then they'd harvest each strip individually, measure the grain yield with a weigh wagon, and see how it shook out. Okay, so I mentioned this was one of the earliest projects, and they got a lot of people to participate back then. Over 6 years of trials, 23 farms, and that resulted eventually in 58 site years. So it's a really neat data set to be able to look back at. Okay, and so I'll just let you know, these are the only experimental results that I'm going to share this morning. Based on your agenda, it looks like you're going to get a lot of data and results. So I'm going to spare you a lot of our data and results, but I will share this for the sake of illustration of the program. And so I mentioned we got 58 site years. Those are all along the bottom of the screen. And this is how their corn yields responded to their high rate or their low rate. The yields that are going to fall above the 0 line are those that had a statistical advantage to the high nitrogen rate, the typical N rate of the farmer. And those that fall below the 0 line were some maybe weird instances of a statistical advantage to the low nitrogen rate. So how did things shake out back in the late 80s, early 90s for this early endeavor into on-farm research here in Iowa? Okay, well, we saw some instances, or they saw some instances rather, of their typical rate being statistically advantageous, beneficial, better corn yields, better returns. There were a few head-scratching weird instances of a low rate being statistically better. Obviously, one, if your equipment interferes with your crop, like the anhydrous toolbar, that's going to be, that's going to ding your yields. But the biggest take home is this, that 48 of the instances, 48 site years, saw no significant effect of nitrogen rate. So the low rate was equal to the high rate. And that was the overwhelming, eye-popping takeaway for the participants, that we're maintaining corn yields with our lower nitrogen rate. So when I talked to one of the participants a few years ago about this, Tom Franzen, Northeast Iowa, he just bluntly told me, I realized I was spending too much money. And they all realized this, and they saw that they could use science to inform their decisions. And I want to emphasize the word I in Tom's reaction and his sharing with me, because these farmers weren't trying to prescribe recommendations for other farmers in terms of how much nitrogen to apply. They wanted to know if they themselves were applying the appropriate rate for their farms and their fields. They weren't trying to dictate or prescribe. And then they realized that conducting their own rigorous scientific research validated some of those suspicions of, am I putting on too much? Well, it turns out a lot of them were. Another farmer from that era who was conducting a lot of trials, Dave Lubin, I spoke to him a few years ago about his experiences, and he told me, on-farm research allows you to test things on your farm for little cost. You can use your equipment, what you have available to you. It taught us to look at things from both an agronomic and economic standpoint. This was their major so what back in the day, that they could use on-farm scientific research as a tool or an agent for change and improvement on each of their individual farms. So another farmer from the 1990s who conducted a lot of on-farm research, Angela Tedesco, she told me, on-farm research personalized things. It allows you to answer immediate questions you have about your farms, your environment. It can be a lot of work, but it can always be worth it. So what these guys and gals did, what these folks did when they started realizing about this tool, is that they started telling others about it. They'd host field days, show people their fields, show people their experiments, say, here's what I found, here's how I did it myself, and that this approach can be used to tackle so many relevant issues and questions. You should give it a shot if you're willing. Randomized, replicated, paired strip trials. So as I look back now as a trained scientist, this approach paired with the investigation of numerous sustainable agriculture practices on actual commercial farms is what instantly drew me to Practical Farmers of Iowa when I landed in the state about 15 years ago to come to school to train as a scientist. So I got hooked, and now I'm blessed to be able to work with these folks. And so now, as part of Practical Farmers Cooperators program, my teammates and I, we do our best to maintain this framework and carry on a legacy of farmer-led investigation. These guys and gals are constantly asking questions and seeking answers on a myriad of things. So let's fast forward to today. How's the tool being used for all these multitude of questions and issues? Well, as many of us probably know, cover crops are really good for the environment, for the soil, but farmers know that too. They want to know, how do they affect my corn and soybeans? Okay, better do a paired strip trial. Cover, no cover, cover, no cover. See how that shakes out for me. We've got more than just corn and soybean farmers in our network. We've got a number of fruit and vegetable growers. They want to know, hey, I looked through all these seed catalogs of these vegetable varieties from all over the country. How are they going to do on my farm in Iowa? I could put plots of many different varieties and see how that shakes out. Can I plant my soybeans green into a living, lush cover crop? Well, better try it in a paired strip trial. What about diversifying my rotation with some extra crops, extra cover crops? Or what happens if I graze my cover crop? How does that play into my system? How about I widen the corn row? Can that give me any extra yield advantage? Or maybe can it grow some more forage for my cattle or sheep in the fall? Or can it improve my soil health? I want to know about this practice that I'm hearing about, reading about. Basically, can I do this? What about this? And really, it doesn't matter what their curiosity is or question is. In the end, the farmers are the ones out there doing the work, planting the seeds, tending to the animals, tending to the crops, taking observations, taking notes. And from what they tell us, that turns out to be extremely meaningful experience. So when the results come in, and after all the dust settles at the end of the year, and after some interpretation of the results from me or one of my fellow PFI staffers, we then start to enter into a conversation with the farmers and we say, okay, well, the results of these research, what are they going to do for you on your farm? Are they going to inform any changes? So I'd like to share with you some of their responses in that regard. A large majority of them say yes, kind of like the folks that I mentioned at the top. And in several cases, for those who actually respond no in the pink there, they felt comfortable rejecting a new practice or product precisely because they took the time to investigate it with a carefully designed research trial. And so then when we ask the cooperators, these farmers, to expand on this question, this yes/no question, I see three types of answers tend to emerge based on, are you going to make a change, yes or no? So in their own words, the first is a yes, I'm going to adopt that something new on a larger scale because I tested it in a few acres in a corner of a field. And this really relates to one of their major motivations in the first place. I've been hearing about this practice or this product. Will it work for me? And as Sam has shared here, he tried something for a couple of years, and he saw, yep, I can do this on more acres. It seems to work. I've tested this idea for a couple of years. Okay, I'm sold. I'm in. I'm going to expand my use of this practice. The other is kind of a yes, I'm going to stop doing that because I realized it either cost me too much or there's too much labor associated, or it actually wasn't giving me a yield benefit. So that's what John is sharing here, realizing I should probably stop doing that because either I don't enjoy it or it's not doing well by my farm for whatever reason that they deem worthy. And then the third is the no, because that new product or practice I was wondering about, it's not worth it adopting for any number of reasons, or they're not sure yet, or really they realize, you know, that's just not for me. It didn't work. I've been playing with it for a few years. I don't need to consider that anymore. I'm ready to move on and not spend any more time on that. And they wouldn't have been able to do that without really testing it rigorously. And so they appreciate that experience. A couple of years ago, we began to more specifically talk to these participants, these farmers, these cooperators in these research trials about what they actually learned from the process of conducting research, not just their results. Yeah, A was better than B, that yielded more, that cost more. We know that from the data. And we wanted to know, was this worthwhile? Was it all this rigor? Like Angela Tedesco mentioned previously, oh, it was always worthwhile. Okay, maybe that was true back in the day. Is it still worthwhile with these new folks and with these new projects that we're entering into? So I was going through all that trouble, all that data management, all that observation, all that clipping and viewing and corresponding with PFI staffers through the year. Was it worthwhile? Okay, this is probably my favorite slide in the whole universe, and definitely in this presentation. Yes, they told us it was tremendously worthwhile. And then we asked them, okay, well, tell us more. You can't just give us a yes, no, right? So expand on this question. And the responses often concerned findings or realizations apart from the data and the results, right? That's what we wanted, and that's where they tended to gravitate towards. So I'll share a few here from Fred and Dick and Jill, who basically are saying, hey, it's always worth trying something new. I always learn something. Gave me a push to actually, try something in a rigorous manner. And just to be honest, these are some of our more frequent participants over the last decade or so. And I know these guys and gals quite well. I'm not surprised by their responses. I know they're not sugarcoating things. I know it's difficult, but I know that these folks like coming back to do research on their farms. And I think it's pretty safe to say that they're bought in. So what actually gives me a lot of pleasure and glee and motivation in my work is when we talk to newer farmers, newer participants like Emily here, who after 2 years of doing trials now is realizing I'm always learning something. I'm paying attention more to my farm apart from just the research I'm doing. Or someone like Kate here, who did her first trial this last year and realized I enjoyed doing research. I didn't know I was going to. I enjoyed abiding by protocols, keeping track of things. Or someone like Jake here, who just like Emily, I started realizing things about my farm that I probably wouldn't otherwise have had happen if I wasn't keeping track of things in a detailed manner, making observations. Or someone like Eric, who just like Kate realized it wasn't as difficult and time consuming as I thought. And now I have data for my farm, my operation that I wouldn't otherwise have, and that is remarkably priceless. Also a first timer. And then finally, I'll share Daniel's response here, who also realized, hey, this was a great experience. I met new people. I came into this community of people. And he's referring to actually Eric, who recruited him to join in on a project with him after they met by chance at a conference in early January 2020. And so they decided to contact me together and put together a trial. And what Daniel's also referring to or alluding to is where I want to go next in terms of the community aspect. And that's our cooperators meeting. So this is an annual gathering where the farmers convene to share their results and lessons from the previous year and make research plans for the coming year. So I'll start by saying the cooperators meeting is truly a farmers meeting. Each farmer that is there that comes is expected to stand up, describe what they did, why they did it, what they found in their experiments. And it's another example of the farmers truly owning their trials. During this meeting, the cooperators also generate new ideas, design timely and relevant trials to address their most pressing farming questions as they evolve and as they come in and as they change from year to year. Many consider the meeting a reward for the hard work they put in, or that my staffers and I put them into when doing their research projects during the year. So I just want to share with you a few of the responses we've received from those who've attended the meetings in recent years. So one was Kate Edwards. I talked to her earlier this summer on the phone, and she told me just bluntly, I think I conduct trials on my farm because it gets me to the cooperators meeting and the opportunity to intimately connect with the other farmers. And not just the farmers who farm like me, but those who have totally different operations than I do. Kate's a vegetable farmer. I always see her sitting next to grain farmers at breaks and in other things, and she just loves picking their brains and entering into conversations. Carmen Black is another cooperator, and I talked with her also this last summer, who's been doing a lot of trials with her sister and her partners on their farm. She shared with me after a conversation, my biggest motivation for coming to the cooperators meeting every year is knowing that there will be an opportunity to connect with other farmers who have similar method to approaching questions and challenges on their farms. More than just learning from other farmers and sharing results with other farmers, I feel like my reason for attending is about the discussion and connection. And those are just two examples, but we get that kind of response a lot, I'll just share. And also what my teammates and I witnessed during the meeting is that in the spirit of all the scientific inquiry and the discovery that they're sharing, they really inspire and encourage one another with their curiosity and their openness. There's lots of sharing of successes and failures, challenges, whatnot. Okay, so I'll also note that our cooperators meeting obviously didn't look like this back in December. We held it virtually over Zoom, several Zoom breakouts just like this, and I think it went quite well. But typically we try to get it like this in a hotel ballroom so we can all be together. Okay, so I'm gonna bring it back around. Why will farmers go out at night to do stuff, go out in the snow to count things? Why will they take on rigorous sampling protocols and then take the spotlight and share their findings in front of their farming peers and share? Why will they adhere to the scientific principles that we thrust upon them and good experimental design and note keeping? So again, to get to answer some of these questions, I go to the source, I go to the horse's mouth. So Tim Siren, Southeast Iowa farmer, will tell you, you can read magazines and watch stuff on YouTube, but those things might not necessarily apply to your farm. You got to do things on your farm to find out for yourself. Or Vic Madsen from the other side of the state, he told me, conducting trials just makes me make better decisions. On-farm research gives us the confidence to try new and different things. And in the end, it's all in service to a community that my teammates and I are collectively building towards together with the farmer researchers. And we see this as a community of farmers these practical farmers of Iowa cooperators as leaders among their farming peers, whose work promotes and influences profitable, diverse, and environmentally sound farms. I'll also end by saying it's extremely encouraging to see other networks and communities of on-farm research, such as the Ecological Farmers Association of Ontario, and also what you all are building here. On-farm, you couldn't have chosen a better name for this effort, for this network that you all are creating. So thank you for having me speak on behalf of Practical Farmers of Iowa. And what questions do you have for me and the program that I'm speaking on behalf of?
Wonderful. Thank you, Stefan, for that one very interesting presentation. For those who are just joining us, we did record Stefan's presentation because of the technical difficulty, so we'll be able to share that with the broader group afterwards. There was a question here. How many cooperators do you have in a given year, Stefan? Maybe you could talk a little bit about the scope of the program.
Sure. We typically have, between, I'd say, 50 to 60 kind of unique cooperators in a year. And so some of those will do 2 or 3 trials, right? But I'm only going to count them once. So I'd say between 50 to 60 in a given year.
Excellent. That's a good number. And how are the farmer, the chat moves on me as people add questions. So how are the farmers chosen for the program? Do they self-select, or is there some outreach program, or how does that happen?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's one that my team and I are always kind of navigating and working with our cooperators on. It is typically self-selection because there is commitment and there has to be motivation there, we found. So typically we say, if you're interested, talk to me or talk to one of my teammates. And then we kind of have a conversation with them and get a feel for, what are they actually interested in? And talk to them about, this is a lot of commitment. It's a lot of follow through on your end and my end. You're going to put in a lot of work. I'm going to put in a lot of work. And stuff falls through, but we want to do our best to not let it fall through. And people usually understand that. But yeah, we don't really kind of blast out and say, who wants to do research this year? We kind of let them come to us, but we do that very carefully. We put that into some of our messaging. Hey, if you're interested, talk to me or talk to one of my teammates. And then we have a conversation, or they have a conversation with one of the cooperators. I got an email last week. Guy said, hey, I talked to so-and-so. He told me I should talk to you because he thought I'd be a good cooperator. Or this is a good research. Like, that's a great way to use our network of members, of farmers, to help us kind of recruit or pre-screen people, if you will.
Yeah, that's great. Do you do anything like where you target different types of production systems or different crops, or do you just kind of let the people come as they are interested for the commitment level? Yeah,
it works best when they come with their idea and their curiosity and their experiment. We can try to recruit for or nudge towards certain things, and we do that on occasion. I find it a much more useful, meaningful relationship and work environment when they come to us and we say, yeah, I think that could be a great trial. And then they really own it because it's their idea. They're not going to let it go to the bottom of the to-do list when things get cruddy during the year. They're going to say, no, I want to know the answer to that. That's my project. That's my experiment. I'm going to prioritize that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and though sometimes we do nudge or have certain initiatives or efforts where we try to get people to do a certain thing. Absolutely.
Well, that's great. And there's a question here in the chat. How much of the sampling and field work do the farmer cooperators do versus you and your team?
Typically all of it.
The farmers do all of it?
Yeah. I mean, we've coached, as you saw, those bags of biomass and the PVC quadrats. That's cool. It's extra work. We get it. We just won't be able to say anything about that when we report the results. Is that okay? Or we could make some, general statements, but I can't do stats on that.
Yeah, great. That's very helpful. So that's a good segue too. There's a couple questions here about funding. So is the organization funded? Where does funding originate to support staff costs at PFI?
Sure. We're funded through a number of sources, both foundation and federal and state grants that we apply for, that a number of us apply for. We also, of course, charge member dues, but that's not probably a large portion of our funding intake. But really, it's cultivating relationships with foundations that have environmental principles or want to see good environmental work in the context of agriculture. But also we then apply for federal and state funding as well. So public and private opportunities. Yeah, as they come along or as we can convince people to support us.
Excellent. And there's lots of questions for you. So this is great.
I'm sure, that's great.
So one of them is, do you offer help with that scientific procedure that I think you mentioned in your presentation, that need to have scientific rigor in that? And
yeah, I mean, so one of our main roles, my and my teammates' roles, is when they have a question with us, we help to, like I showed earlier, that kind of diagram of the paired strip trial. Like I will then present, that's one of the first things I'll present to them. Like, can you plant like this, your 2 treatments? Because that's what it's going to take. Like, we're not splitting a field in half. If you do that, that's cool. We can use that as maybe to inform future projects. We'll call that a look-see project or a year 0. But we definitely coach them on, I need you to do it this way because that's good scientific and statistical practice. We've had various forms of trying to teach basic statistics or statistic principles. I'm not a statistics teacher. It's very difficult to teach that. Of course, as a scientist, I abide by the basic statistical principles, but we do our best to kind of marry those or convey the message of, here's how statistics is basically done, or our experiments are done in an academic or scientific setting. We can apply those on your farm, and here's how we would do that. And sometimes, we try to go full hog, and they're like, well, I'm not willing to do all that. So we try to kind of meet them in the middle, right? Well, like, can you at least maybe alternate the strips? I'm cool with that. If you can give me 5 or 6 replications, I'm okay with alternating rather than a total full-on randomization. I can suspend some of my statistical ethics for that. And I've actually talked to people who said that's okay. As long as they do enough replications, you can just alternate. But yeah, some of that scientific and statistical coaching of that literacy is part of what we do. It is difficult though. I will say that.
Oh, really interesting. A couple more really good questions here. So one, thank you for a very interesting presentation. I'm wondering if the work on nitrogen in the 80s resulted in long-term changes. In other words, do the farmers in this group apply significantly less nitrogen on their farms?
That's a good question. Well, so one of the things, I think they have a better, those guys and gals have a very good understanding of questioning what they do. Right, let's put it at that. Like, do I actually need to put on more manure? Do I need to put on more anhydrous or more nitrogen? I think they have more of that approach, or they realized also, oh, I've got alfalfa in the rotation or clover, or I've got cattle or hog manure. I can really pay attention to my crop, both take soil tests or end yield to inform. I think I'm doing okay. I think it's more that they have that kind of approach to anything on their farms, including nitrogen management. One of the other major projects of the early years involved reducing their herbicides and using various forms of cultivation to control weeds or manage weeds. And when a lot of them saw that they didn't need to use as much or any herbicides, a lot of those early guys and gals transitioned to organic production because they realized, I can do this. I can use manure for fertility and steel and rotation for weed control. They didn't all convert to organic. And I'm not saying like that was what the whole initiative was, but a lot of them realized I could convert to organic and get a price premium on what I'm producing. So that's the kind of approach they started taking just to their operations in general. And again, that then expanded out to, you don't have to convert to organic, or you don't have to look at what I'm doing, but use this approach to assess what you might be doing to shave a few dollars off, or improve a few bushels if you can. And so that's what's really kind of transpired and transcended, excuse me, across the generations.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, these guys, right, if they're organic, they're only using manure and clovers and alfalfas for nitrogen anymore. So, yeah.
Great. And I know I'm stealing a little bit of time from later in the morning, but I have two more questions I think are really interesting. So the first one is, are farmers choosing research objectives that focus beyond production and profitability? And do the results impact adaptive management decisions? You have a very engaged audience here asking tough questions. So I guess that beyond profit.
I'll say that for the most part, it is on production and economic viability. It really is, because at the most basic level, I'm hearing about this product or this practice. I'm going to give it a shot. Now that's right. That's a real early entrance into research. So it's kind of a very simple, I'm going to test A versus B. Okay, it got me a few extra bushels, but it didn't pay for the product. Or the practice. Like, I think I need to try that again. I do think there is an evolution within them, right? They'll start with some easy projects like that, and they'll get to a little more heady or larger questions. But really, it mostly breeds like, well, I tested that over there in this field. I'm going to test something else over here. And that really, if I'm honest, is how the program began and what it's really designed to do and do well. That's not to say that other grander questions aren't important, and that we probably have gotten some nudging or encouragement to see, like, how is this network really affecting change or land use in the state or in the Midwest? That's a big, large question. I don't know exactly how to answer that. I'd love to know, but really, the day-to-day, year-to-year is for these farmers to have a framework to test things for themselves, and then share it widely with others, right? Like, that's the big part. Is we're not going to just sit on this. We're going to publish the results on our website. You're going to go and talk to people about it too. And we're going to help you find those opportunities. Or I'm going to be your mouthpiece at larger events too.
Yeah, excellent. That's great. This last question that I'm going to use, and I know there's a couple more I'm not going to get to, but it sets us up well for the next panel, I think. So there's a comment here. I see a lot of value in the Ontario On-Farm program also being in strengthening the ability to quantify soil and water benefits of producer adoption of best practices in real-world application. This happens best when the on-farm sites are longer term and we have better documentation of the longer term practices and results. Do you have many longer term sites in Iowa where there is that long-term data getting at some of those soil and water best practices?
So for the most part, we do not. I'll go back. One of those images I showed of the cover and no cover, that was a 10-year project that we were able to get. We first started with 12 farmers and we ended up with 5 who went the whole 10 years. Long-term is great, right? As a scientist, I'm like, heck yeah, let's do a 15-year trial. But what I see, farmers are dynamic and fluid, right? They're gonna learn and adjust things year to year, right? They're gonna do a project 1 year and they're gonna realize, like, you know what I should have done? Or what I learned I should have done is this. I'm gonna do it again next year and I'm gonna try it like that. I'm not going to say no to him or her because they're dealing with their commercial farm, their business, their livelihood. And if they want to keep refining and changing things and looking at things for themselves, I can't put the brakes on them. And it's different than true. Well, not true is the wrong word. Academic science, where, yeah, you want to stay by something for 3-4 years. It's just a different side of the research arena, right? That's great. And we can learn from that. I get scientists to talk to the farmers all the time about their experiments. The farmers are keen to listen to that and adopt. Oh, what did she just say? I'm going to try that on my farm, and then evolve it and adapt it for myself. So yeah, sometimes we like to try to get, let's do a long-term trial. Maybe I can get people to commit to 2 years, but really they want to keep moving and evolve and adapt. So I have to abide by them and how I'm going to best have a working relationship with them do I want to say, no, 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 put the brakes on? Or do I want to say, yeah, yeah, let's keep looking at that. And here's how we do it. And we just have a very meaningful relationship, and it results in a good story and them sharing how they did it and what happened.
Yeah, that's really interesting, that difference between a publicly owned field trial site versus private business. And so that's kind of the interesting tension, I guess, with on-farm research.
Yeah, but I think they can work together. I really do.
Yeah.
I think they help to both tell a story.
Awesome. And I have a nice quote, comment here that a field without a trial in it is a lost opportunity to learn. So I think that's a good way to summarize your presentation this morning. So
I hear small fragments of that from our cooperators all. They share that same sentiment. So whoever said that, thank you very much.
Great. Well, on behalf of everyone here, I'm sure we all want to thank you very much for your presentation this morning. Lots of positive comments and lots of interest in your topic and in your the work you're doing in Iowa. So thank you, Stefan, for joining us, and really appreciate your time and sharing your insights with us this morning.
Great. It was my pleasure and my honor to speak, and I'm very humbled to share our story. So thank you all, and have a great rest of your forum, and good luck to all your work across Ontario.